Hey everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and on today's video we're going to be taking a look at the awesome Killer Instinct at-home arcade from Arcade1Up. So that's right guys, today I'm going to be taking a look at the 3/4 scale Killer Instinct at-home arcade from Arcade1Up. I want to say a huge thank you to my friend Mike Dalton for actually lending me his cabinet so I could test it out for the purposes of this review. Killer Instinct was a huge arcade and console fighting game hit, but not one I really got into growing up, so I wasn't sure if I was going to pick up this cabinet, but after testing it out, let's find out if I feel it deserves a spot in my GenieCade and maybe if you should consider picking it up as well. What was once thought to be impossible, the Arcade1Up Killer Instinct cab now stands tall in the GenieCade, albeit temporarily, and I have to say it looks really cool. Making an Arcade1Up version of Killer Instinct was going to be a tall task, as the original was a Nintendo and Rare collaboration, and now Rare is owned by Microsoft, so John D would have to pull a rabbit out of his hat to make the licensing work. On top of that, Killer Instinct is a notoriously hard game to get working through emulation and require special care for it to work on the somewhat underpowered Arcade1Up chipset. Luckily, Arcade1Up had an ace up their sleeve that would help with both areas in their previous working relationship with Code Mystics. Code Mystics had already worked with Rare and Microsoft to bring the original games to the Xbox and could help bridge the licensing gap, as well as use their expertise to make sure the games ran well and looked good on Arcade1Up's hardware. With everything worked out in those areas, Arcade1Up delivered Killer Instinct to the at-home market. First off, let's talk about the aesthetics, and this is a great looking cabinet. When first introduced during CES 2021 on the 1UP Weekly, the original design for the Killer Instinct Arcade1Up more closely resembled the Midway and Capcom Legacy Edition cabinet's form factor, and as we all know, that was a major problem. Luckily for us, they went back to the drawing board and redesigned the cabinet to more closely resemble the real arcade, and to certainly be more ergonomically friendly. The side panel does still have the remnants of the Legacy Edition side panel, but the cabinet has been lengthened with the new side panel extender pieces to give it more height, and the top of the side panel is adjusted, giving both the marquee and monitor more slope and better viewing angles for the players who prefer to stand. The art on the side is taken directly from the Killer Instinct arcade cabinet and looks like it's pretty much perfectly recreated here, minus the screw hole at the top of the sword. One thing to note is that this cabinet decided against adding a contrasting trim color for the side panels and cabinet, so we don't get that traditional pop, but I think simple may be better here. The marquee was a total surprise for me, as it's actually pretty good looking in person. Arcade1Up has a history of releasing some pretty subpar marquees when it's predominantly black or dark colored, and in all early images of the cabinet this seemed to be no different. However, seeing it in person, it looks much better than I expected. I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, but not nearly as washed out as I anticipated, and I don't feel the need to replace it. One thing I alluded to earlier that I do really like is the marquee is angled instead of bar straight like on the Star Wars or Burger Time cabinets, which improves the viewing angle for standing in front of the cab. The screen on this one is great, as it's once again the 17-inch BOE monitor we are used to from Arcade1Up, and the screen is bright and vibrant, but there is an asterisk coming. When I started playing Killer Instinct and Killer Instinct 2, something looked off as the characters on screen looked really pixelated and blurry at the same time. The game also includes scanline and a CRT filter, but I like sharp pixels and typically play with no filtering, and this just didn't look good and undersold how good the screen truly is. I was concerned the graphical degradation in my mind was necessary to run this game on Arcade1Up's somewhat underpowered chipset, but you have to keep in mind that Code Mystics developed this game just like they did for the arcade port to the Xbox, and on that version there is a forced CRT filter. Why? Because the game is programmed to optimize its look on a CRT, so turn on the filter and look how much better the game looks in the way it was meant to be viewed. If you are interested in seeing how well the screen can perform unfiltered, check out Battletoads and the console ports, which look amazing on it. The control panel looks amazing and is a great recreation of the arcade original. It does include a light-up control deck, which people either love or they hate, but I think they are neat. One thing I really do like about this one compared to the others is that it automatically turns on when the cabinet comes on and remembers your last light setting, while most of the others require an additional button press. The controls are decent but not great by any stretch of the imagination. For Killer Instinct hardcore fans, you will either want to replace the buttons and sticks or wait for the Pro cabinet. For casual fans like myself, they are fine for now. The stick actually feels really tight and precise, and I'm wondering if they added a more resistant or heavier spring. The buttons are the buttons. I'm not anticipating being able to pull off super long, complex combos on this cabinet, but that has little to do with the controls and more to do with my skill level. Last thing I did want to mention is that, like with any Arcade1Up fighting cabinet, the control panel is a little crowded for 2 players, so I anticipate the majority of my 2-player games will be over Wi-Fi instead of in person for comfort reasons. The kick plate for this cabinet has a molded coin door, so automatically it's a passing kick plate. I can honestly do without the additional game logos being included under the coin door, but they don't completely ruin the aesthetic. The J panel actually has art on it for once, and it's this cool Killer Instinct logo that looks great, but I feel like they could have also made this a light up J panel. The riser is perhaps the simplest riser they have ever made, even going back to the generic Arcade1Up branded riser days. It's completely black without even a contrasting trim color to make it pop, with just a subtle gray, rare logo adorning the front. While some could say that this is lazy, I think it's perfect and fits the aesthetic of the cabinet to a T. Again, sometimes simpler is better. So guys, I'm very happy to say that the 3/4 scale Killer Instinct looks fantastic. Arcade1Up absolutely killed recreating the look and feel of the original arcade. But the big question was never whether or not they could make this cabinet look good, so much as if they could get the game to work properly on Arcade1Up's hardware. Let's find out if Arcade1Up plus Code Mystics could pull off the ultimate combo. So were Arcade1Up and Code Mystics able to get Killer Instinct and Killer Instinct 2 running properly on Arcade1Up's somewhat underpowered hardware? It certainly seems so to me, but again, I have to preface this whole conversation with the fact I am not a Killer Instinct arcade hardcore fan, nor do I have access to the original cabinet or ROM to compare it against. I do, however, have the arcade port on the Xbox that Code Mystics brought to the console a few years back, and can say both games play surprisingly well compared to that. Killer Instinct was of course released in 1994 at the height of the arcade fighting game craze of the early 90s, and was Nintendo's answer to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter II that, while borrowing elements of both, still delivered a unique product that etched its own arcade legacy. The game's claim to fame were its impressive 3D rendered graphics, lightning attack speed, and merciless combos, and of course, a killer soundtrack. All of those elements which the classic arcade were known for are present here in the at-home release from Arcade1Up, and I'm surprised that no real corners had to be cut in order to make the emulation work. The characters look amazing once you put on the CRT filter, that is. The sound is really good, albeit Arcade1Up could use a little higher quality speaker, which I'm sure we will see for the Pro Series release. Last but not least is the gameplay, and this is where it really shines, as the moves, blocks, and combos all work so well, and that breakneck pace that makes this game so special translates through here. Killer Instinct 2 was of course the 1996 follow-up to the original arcade hit, and does what every good sequel should do by improving the character models and overall aesthetics, slightly improving gameplay, all the while keeping the core elements of what made the initial game so great. Basically, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Just as impressively, Arcade1Up and Code Mystics were able to get this game running just as well as they did with Killer Instinct, despite its improvements. What's probably most impressive about the feat of Code Mystics getting Killer Instinct to work so well on Arcade1Up's hardware is that they were also able to add an online option. Now, online fighting has been something Arcade1Up has certainly shown an adeptness for so far, with excellent releases like Marvel vs. Capcom and Street Fighter II Big Blue, but the games on those cabinets are much easier to run. How would the transition to online impact the overall performance of the game already exceeding limitations on this hardware? The answer is almost flawlessly, as I've had so much fun testing my meager fighting skills and Killer Instinct expertise against other KI cabinet owners across the world. As I have mentioned time and time again, the internet in my arcade is spotty at best, but I have so far had zero issues having competitive and fun matches against competitors online with no compromises like slowdown or graphical degradation. The only unfortunate negative to date with the online features of the cabinet is the lack of a lobby system, as you choose your online matches from the main screen, and of course for the online fighting community there is no spectator mode. Well, you may say, who cares about spectator mode? Well, spectator mode allows you to watch other competitors online battle it out. You can use this yourself as a method to study better competitors' styles and perhaps gain a competitive advantage against them, while tournament holders would use it as a main display to show the matches happening. If Arcade1Up does want to get serious about esports and the fighting arena, hopefully they will go back and add this feature through update, and especially before the pro model comes out. However, if you are a casual who just wants to fool around online and fight some people, you won't miss this feature. Where this is a Rare cabinet, they added some extra value in the form of Rare's first big video game hit, Battletoads. Now, I wasn't super familiar with the arcade game before this release, and my Battletoads history all revolves around childhood trauma from playing the NES game. The arcade version of Battletoads is actually really awesome. It definitely leans more on the side of a beat-em-up than anything else, and that works well for the franchise, as all the elements from the NES game transfer over. I think the graphics are fantastic and the gameplay is top notch. The game also adds some other gameplay elements and stages that keep it fresh again, much like the NES game did. The one note that I would like to bring to your attention is the game's runtime, as this will take you approximately an hour to beat, which is a little on the long side for me with a beat 'em up. Luckily, this game does include online cooperative play, so have a buddy jump in with you and take down the Dark Queen once and for all. They also did include the console games, which is what it is. I will never be the guy to try and justify the inclusion of a console game on an arcade cabinet, but take it for what it is. It's a bonus, and if you are so inclined to play Battletoads on an arcade cabinet, you can play with the classic 8-bit graphics of the NES or the weird 16-bit graphics of the Genesis version. Overall, the variety and quality of the three main games and addition of Wi-Fi for online fighting and cooperative multiplayer for the beat 'em up add a ton of value. Good games and good times. Well guys, that's my take on the Killer Instinct at-home arcade from Arcade1Up. I think this is an awesome cabinet that truly does justice to the original arcade and fans of the franchise. Typically, I would tell you that this is a must-have cabinet for hardcore fans, but unfortunately the announcement of a pro cabinet kind of complicates that. If you are looking for something as close to the real arcade as possible with arcade accurate quality controls and price isn't an option, then perhaps it would be best if you held off and waited for the pro cabinet to come out. But if you are typically fine with the 3/4 scale, don't mind the controls, and can't wait for the pro to come out, maybe you should then consider picking up the 3/4 scale option. Anyways guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Arcade1Up Killer Instinct cabinet? Is this a must-have for you? And if so, did you pick up the 3/4 scale version, or are you going to wait for the Pro? Let me know in the comments down below. I also want to say thank you again to my buddy Mike Dalton. Thank you so much for lending me this cabinet for the purpose of this review, and because I liked it so much, we ended up actually working out a trade, and now Killer Instinct has a permanent home in the GenieCade. Thank you so much everybody for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.